I want to welcome everyone to the Pacific Seminar Series with the Australian Centre for Pacific Islands Research. For those that don't know me, my name is Bridget Horsey and I'm going to host the session for you today. Today, we're really happy to finally have Mary Harm from the Pacific Climate Warriors presenting for us. The original time for this seminar with Mary, it did have to be postponed, but we've been really fortunate to be able to reschedule Mary again today. So thank you, Mary, for being flexible, and to all of our participants for coming back again today to listen to Mary. Now, I'm just going to quickly tell you a little bit about Mary and what she's here to talk to us about today, and then we'll get started. So Mary, she is a proud Samoan, Chinese, Fijian born in Canada and raised on Turrbal country, which is north of the Brisbane River. She is the eldest daughter of the eldest daughter of the eldest daughters, so lots of women in Mary's family, and she was named after the matriarchs on both sides of her family. Passionate about the power of storytelling and creating social change, Mary enjoys working in multidisciplinary spaces, in particular with young people, to co-design initiatives and projects that are of value to them and their communities. Mary currently serves as the Queensland coordinator for the Pacific Climate Warriors. And in this presentation today, Mary will share on the work of the Pacific Climate Warriors, what climate justice work looks like for Pacific communities that are based in Australia, and how we can continue to push the Waka Waka canoe forward together for a fair and just transition away from fossil fuels. Okay, so I'll hand you over to Mary. I just thought I'd mention before I do that if you do have questions throughout the session, please pop them in the chat. I'll hold on to them until the end and we can speak to Mary then. Otherwise, Mary, it is all yours now.
Awesome. Thank you, Bridget. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. And I know we haven't got not too many people here today, which is nice. So I think today will be quite casual. So happy, yes, please use the chat to put through questions. I'm just going to now share my slides, so bear with me. I'm just praying that this works. Okay. Can we see something? Yes?
Yes, we can see it.
Wonderful, wonderful. So thank you, Bridget, for that wholesome intro. I thought I'd also firstly start by acknowledging country. And so for those who are joining outside of Australia, I thought I'd also share that country is actually more a term used for designated areas of land within so-called Australia. So today I'm joining you all from Newcombe Bay country, which is south of the Brisbane River. But as Bridget eloquently put, I live and I grew up on Turrbal country, which is north of the Brisbane River. And so I think for many Pacifica people that are with us today on this Zoom, I think we can appreciate what it means to be connected, to be spiritually connected to land, sea, and sky. And so in that spirit, I really want to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land and of these lands, sea and sky. But I also really want to acknowledge the shared narrative and history between First Nations people and Pacifica people, especially here in Queensland, and the great cost of that sharedness. And so every day, today and every day, we acknowledge that this land always was and always will be Aboriginal land. And I also want to extend that acknowledgement to you all, to your families, your communities, your ancestors, and the experiences, wisdom, knowledge, challenges, hope that has, I guess, guided you into the work that you do and why you're possibly here today as well. So thank you for joining us. This is very new for me to present in this way, so please forgive me if anything goes a bit whack. But thank you for, I guess, moving at the speed of trust. And I really want to acknowledge the team there, the Asia Pacific, it's the Australian Pacific Centre for Island Research, is that correct? Pacific Island Research, for giving me this platform to share on.
That's good enough.
To share on the great work that a lot of our young people here in Brisbane are doing. So just really wanted to make sure that we centered this conversation, acknowledging that We are on stolen land, and the work that we are all doing, but in particular in terms of climate justice and climate action, is rooted and is grounded in that this is not our land. And we continue to stand in solidarity with the fight for First Nations justice. So today is obviously about storytelling and how storytelling can create social change. And so I thought it'd be best firstly to talk about, I guess, my story. And this artwork is a portrait of myself that was actually painted by a good friend of mine, but also a artist of PNG background named Serge R. Wong. And he named this artwork Musselina. My full name is Mary Musselina Harm, and as Bridget mentioned, I'm the eldest daughter of the eldest daughter of the eldest daughter, and I was named after the matriarchs on both sides of my family. My mum is of Samoan descent, and Musselina was my great grandmother, and she lived 103 years. And it's her, you know, her prayers, her hopes, her dreams, her sacrifice that has really pushed our family buckle forward, not only into the climate space, but into many other spaces that we thought Pacifica people would never be. And on my dad's side, my dad is Chinese, but born and raised in Fiji. And his grandmother's name was Mary. And so that's where I get my first name. And she was a strong, strong woman who persevered through a lot. She fled China when Mao closed the borders and found herself in Fiji. And like many migrant families, really had to work hard to push their buckle forward. So I carry with me those two matriarchs, but also the power and stories that they were able to gift the world. And so Serge, after I shared this kind of with him, painted this portrait, and he's used blue colorings, which you might be able to see in the image, to depict the ocean. Because I was sharing with him, you know, like, although I come from multiple different backgrounds, it's the ocean that connects us all together. And so he's depicted that through the artwork. And I also want to share, you know, when we do a lot of our work with our young people, we normally gather in a circle and we do something called a mana circle. And mana in Pacifica languages mean like inner spirit or inner power. And we often invite people to bring a mana item into the space and share with us, you know, what is it that gives them power and gives them energy and I guess, validation in this space. And for me, I normally bring this necklace, which you can see in the image as well, which is called I'm going to say Ula Nifl. And for me, I grew up here in Brisbane, away from my ancestral homelands. I can't speak either of my parents' mother tongue. And so for me to participate in culture is quite difficult. And growing up, I had multiple identity crises, trying to understand, you know, who am I? What is my purpose? You know, I'm too Chinese to be Samoan, I'm too Samoan to be Chinese, and it's this constant in between. And so for me, when I wear that and when I dance Siva Samoa, traditional Samoan dance, that is when I feel my most authentic self. And that's when I gain my power and my energy to show up and speak up and all the other things that we do. And so I studied a Bachelor of Communications, majoring in public relations, because I found that my passion was actually storytelling. And I went through high school not knowing what I wanted to do. I wanted to become a marine biologist at one point. I wanted to be a dermatologist at another point. I wanted to be a teacher. I thought about maybe I should be a sparky, all these different things that I thought I could do. And it was really difficult to kind of pinpoint what it was. And it was storytelling that I found kind of brought all those worlds together. And that's kind of what also led me into this space. So I thought I'd also share with you this poem that I've written to maybe, I guess, communicate a bit better my story and kind of where I'm coming from. And it's a poem called Dancing Between Worlds. And I've shared this in a few different spaces, but I find it empowering sharing it in the climate space because I think it puts in perspective what it means to advocate for climate justice in so-called Australia. You know, we're diaspora. We are not on the front lines of climate change, but we are on the front lines of climate action. And what does it mean being a Pacific Islander woman or Pacific Islander person living away from home? I hope this poem might give you a bit of insight into, I guess, what my experience is. So this poem was, I guess, inspired by reflections of listening to another friend's poem and my own experiences living here in Brisbane. So I sit in that often awkward in-between space, too brown to be white, too white to be brown, but I don't recall white being part of my family tree. They say my dad is yellow, my mum is brown. In school, no one taught me what color yellow and brown make. Confused, displaced, out of place, they told me I was taking up too much space. With a foot on each shore, it's no wonder why my knees gave in. But it was the ocean in between that caught me, that nourished me, that saved me. The ocean is the in-between, the ocean is my family tree, and the ocean is me. And how beautiful is the ocean to exist, knowing that on every shore across the globe, it will be rejected day after day, tide after tide, moon after moon. This is the resilience and the power of the in-between. When we bring together the most unlikely communities, ideas, industries, flavors, there is an ocean of power there waiting to be held. And imagine how many of the world's challenges we could solve if we just dared to lean into the vulnerability of the in-between. This is what change looks like to me, and this is the power of the in-between. And I should also acknowledge that it's also World Oceans Day today, so I thought it'd also be appropriate to share that with you all. But that's kind of how where I sit in terms of being a Pacific Islander, growing up away from my homeland, but feeling so passionate about fighting for my homeland. And so I thought I'd now, I guess, go into storytelling. You know, why do stories matter? And how do stories create social change? And I think all of us can think of the stories that we might have heard growing up, or the stories we heard in school, both bad and good, and how those have kind of shaped our perspective of the world and our purpose and where we think we fit in. So I'm going to attempt to do a Mentimeter. And for those who haven't done a Mentimeter before, pretty much all you need to do if you've got your phone or your computer, you just log into www.menti.com and put in this, let me just see if it works. Here we go. So at the top of the screen, you can see the website and there's a code there. And if you pop that code in, it'll ask you for 3 responses. And pretty much I just want to understand what you think storytelling is, or what first comes to mind when you think of storytelling. And when you put those in, they'll come up live. So we'll be able to see what everyone's thinking and feeling about storytelling. There's no right or wrong answer. I just want to gauge, I guess, what people were vibing. That's for a better word. Is anyone having any issues with Mentimeter?
What's meant to be happening here?
Sorry, Inez?
What's meant to be happening in the Mentimeter?
So when you go into www.menti.com, you type in those digits, and then you can, when you put in the words, it'll come up on the screen, like a word cloud. Yes.
Mary, would you like us to just put one word that represents what we think of, or like a sentence or whatever?
Whatever you would like, and whatever what they will let you type.
Okay.
I think there might be a word limit.
Yeah.
We've got sharing. I love that. Oh, culture, a way to share history, family, human truth. Oh, look at this, reflections. Oh, this is awesome. Heart. Oh, I love that. Because I often feel that storytelling is like very underrated in terms of like a tool. And so it's really cool that people are putting up these words. Journey, I love it. Dad telling silly stories. Dad jokes are stories too. Way to share. Oh, wonderful personal perspective. How cool is this Mentimeter thing? Just discovered it recently and I was like, oh, wow, it's great.
It's cool.
Fun.
I need to
it's
record
really...
this so I can use it when I'm teaching, Mary. So
Oh, it's so great.
It's a really cool tool.
It's also really good too for kids because they put sometimes they use like emojis. So clever.
That's cool.
Awesome. Thanks for showing everybody. That's really awesome to like, yeah, just and see what you guys think and feel about story, because it's actually very similar to some emojis there. Look at y'all. Too good. Awesome. I'm going to switch back to my slides here. Hopefully. Yeah, awesome. So yeah, exactly what you guys were sharing there. And I love that we were able to quickly reflect on what storytelling is. Because like I said, I think it's so underrated. And the beautiful thing for me about storytelling is that it does more than just educate and inform. You know, it inspires, it challenges our assumptions, it nurtures assumptions, it empowers you. It is also a call to action that can sometimes come from a story, and it changes your perspective, or it enforces your perspective of something. So what I want to share with you next is the story of the Pacific Climate Warriors. So shortly we'll have a video play, but I just want to quickly, I guess, for those who haven't heard of the Pacific Climate Warriors, we are a grassroots youth-led network that's active across the Pacific, with also teams in Portland in the US, in Auckland and Wellington in New Zealand, and in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, Canberra, soon to be Tasmania, here in Australia. And we exist to build a movement in the Pacific, by the Pacific, and for the Pacific, because we know that we contribute to climate change the least, and yet we are the most affected. And so I'm not here to tell you about what climate change is. I think most of you would know, but I think I'm wanting to more share why we are fighting for climate action and why we feel so passionate about climate justice, and perhaps then how you can communicate that why and that urge, or that sense of urgency, to others who may not feel that sense of urgency, if you're still with me. And so we elevate and amplify the stories of communities on the front lines of climate change, to shift the narrative of Pacifica people as mere victims of climate change to warriors of the Pacific, thriving and surviving despite climate change. You know, we have the solutions, we have the ancestral knowledge, we have the practical, sustainable ways of living that can solve the climate crisis. And so I'm going to now stop sharing, and I think Bridget will then share her screen so that we can watch this video, which is actually kind of the birth of the Pacific Climate Warriors.
So, Amy.
We are fighting! We are not fighting! We are fighting! We are not fighting! We are fighting!
We are hopeful that our journey here, as you know, Pacific Climate Warriors, is a peaceful journey. We bring with us, you know, our culture, our tradition. We bring with us our people, you know, and we travel to Newcastle to highlight these impacts of climate change, to share our stories with the rest of the world, and hopefully get Australia to reconsider the commitment to expanding the fossil fuel industry, because if they continue to expand the industry, it will continue to expand the destruction to the Pacific.
Try to come up with something which is really unique in our tradition, and which reflects how important our culture is, how badly, this climate change affects our culture. Building this traditional canoe will really show the voices of the people in our place, indigenous people who live back home, who are struggling with these challenges of climate. So we take the canoe as a tool and as a mechanism that reflects our culture, that reflects our tradition, to show the world that we are at the front line of climate change. We are facing this challenge in our daily in the back home. Climate change is real.
Climate change is impacting our livelihoods, our food security, our environments. Then it's important for us to tell that story, and in the hope that it will change people's mind of the way they are treating the environment. Us going to the flotilla in Newcastle is taking that message that we want a solution. We want the world to be responsible and do something about that.
I chose to go to Australia, to Newcastle, because climate change is a personal issue for me. Living on low-lying atolls has been a lived reality for all of our people, for the Marshall Islands, and I felt it was really important that I join and to bring that story out so people are aware of it and they can help us, so they can also help us do something about it.
It's important for us as young people in the Pacific to share our stories, to share our lives, to share our history and our culture and our traditions, because this is who we are. This is what makes us the people of the Pacific.
In Newcastle, that's what we did. We brought our stories. So many people connected with us, and it just moves people. Stories move people and connect us to one another at a deeper level. And I think that's what was so powerful about our action in Newcastle. We did it in a very specific way, in our own way, and it really motivated and touched so many people.
It's so important that as young people, we stand together and we stand united, and we're ready to share this message with our people and with the rest of the world. We are here as warriors to tell the world that we are not drowning, we are fighting.
Thank you so much, Bridget.
Mary, that was the video that I watched when I mentioned to you before everyone joined that I watched, and it was really moving, and I was like, oh, we need to speak with the Pacific Climate Warriors.
Yes.
And I don't know how it was for everybody.
I'm so glad
else.
you said that, because
Sorry.
no, you're right.
I was just going to say,
sorry.
no, I was just going to say, I don't know what the quality was like for everybody at home watching that video, because it was quite patchy for me here. So maybe, Amy, you could stick the link to that video in the chat if anybody would like to kind of watch it at home with the internet flowing nicely, because I know for me, I didn't catch some of what people were saying, and I think it's a really awesome video for people to watch.
Thanks, Bridget. It is. I watched it so many times and I still get emotional watching it, because for me, that was the first time I saw my people and I heard the voices of my ancestors in an action that was about climate change. You know, it was done our way. It was done in a way that was meaningful, and it was peaceful. You know, we saw dancing, we saw music, we saw cultural attire, and that's not seen in the mainstream. And so it was that video for me that actually pushed me into this space, because I thought, you know, I live in Australia. I have such an opportunity here to really create change, because we know what we do here and the decisions that are made in this country have direct impact back home. And so it was that video for me that really pushed me. And I think I use it every now and then to kind of ground me back into the work that we do, and ensuring that we have those voices at the forefront. So I thought I wanted to share this, I think it's a tweet, yes, this tweet that says, resistance is not a one-lane highway. Maybe your lane is protesting, maybe your lane is organizing, maybe your lane is counseling, maybe your lane is art activism, maybe your lane is surviving the day. Do not feel guilty for not occupying every lane. We need, all of them. And so I think for us as Pacific Climate Warriors, storytelling is our lane. And using culture to do that is our lane. And we know that there's also a place for other ways of advocacy. But for us and for our community, that is what we do. So I thought I'd share this quote as here, like, our spoken word, our ceremony, our movement, and our culture is a form of protest. And it's survived so much. And so we use that in the work that we do to fight for climate justice. And for here in Brisbane in particular, I want to share some examples of how we use storytelling to do just that. And one of the storytelling tours that we've had recently is called the Breaking Ground Frontline Troop Storytelling Tour. And it started in Logan here in Brisbane and ended in Rockhampton City. And that was in the lead up to the last federal election. And we brought young people from the Pacific, but also young people that live here to curate a storytelling, show. And we knew for places like Rockhampton, things like door knocking would not work. Rockhampton is a mining town, and it is not a high Pacifica community there either. And so we had to come in with a softer approach. And so these are some images, from the Breaking Ground Storytelling Tour. And we had different island communities perform, but all with a story about their performance and linked back to climate action. And again, our movement, our song, our dance, our culture is a form of protest. And we were using these stories to change the hearts and the minds of communities before they were going into the polling booths for the last federal election. And again, Rockhampton, mining town, we knew that our tour was successful because we ended up on the front page, I think the second page of Capricorn, one of their newspapers up there. And this is the first, to have firstly this big of a spread, but also about climate change and Indigenous voices in a mining town in their newspaper was phenomenal. And so we were expecting about 50 people in the crowd. We had about 400 rock up. And people coming up to us after saying, we didn't know that Kiribati imports their water from Australia. We didn't know that, Tokelau experiences king tides. We didn't know that families were having to migrate from their homes because of rising sea levels. And it was all because we were sharing stories in a way that was culturally authentic, but also true. And people were able to resonate and connect. So that was a really beautiful way that we were able to create social change through storytelling. Another example is this film that short storytelling film, that was also part of the climate festival during COP. And this was filmed by some young people here in Brisbane, and it was about how what we do here matters and how we're not on the front lines of climate change, but we're on the front lines of climate action. And in the video, you will see an elder. Her name is Tamaima. She's a Tokelauan elder. And although she doesn't have the access to the materials that she would normally use to weave, she's adapted to ensure that she continues to pass down that culture to her children. So I'll quickly let Bridget share her screen again. This one's a really short one, but I hope you feel empowered by this one because it's really special. Thanks, Bridget. Again, have your volume up.
All right, can you all see that?
Yeah, we can see it.
Perfect.
We draw strength and resilience from our Indigenous knowledge and traditions to fight back against the climate crisis. The very same knowledge that was birthed by our forefathers and passed down to us through stories from our elders are the core of our understanding of the world. These stories weave and hold many of us together and reminds us that we are bound together ever so intimately with our ancestral homelands. Stories, like the spaces in between weaving, hold separate entities together. This space, this betweenness, is not empty space, nor is it a space that separates, but one that unifies us as Pacific people.
Thanks, Bridget.
Thanks, Mary. Another really powerful video. Amy, could you pop the link in the chat for that one as well for anyone that had
Thank you.
funky internet? Yeah.
So you'll see that yeah, we really want to capture the diversity of what Pacifica looks like. And for us, this video was about, how our stories is the wind that pushes our buckle forward. And so it was really special to have that screen that COP, the recent COP. And COVID hit at a time when we released this, and we thought, how do we advocate for climate action, climate justice when we're in lockdown? Like what does that even look like? So our team created this free downloadable coloring book called Color Between the Frontlines. And you'll see that each of the characters in this coloring book is actually from that short film. And we made this free and downloadable for families and young people across the world to download, print, and color at home while they're in lockdown, and have those, conversations with family. We also had quotes that were also in language attached to those characters, so that, families could have these conversations in a safe way that meant something to them. And so it was really cool. We got lots of photos of kids around the globe coloring these awesome images. And I remember one of the mums messaging us saying, when my boy was coloring, he was saying his uncles and aunties' names because it looked like them. And we thought that was really special. So this was another way that we use storytelling to push the agenda for climate action, but during a time when, climate action, we couldn't go out to the streets, we couldn't be filming, we couldn't be attending events, we couldn't hold cultural, even community events. This was how we did it. Another example I want to share is a recent one, and it's called Amplify, and it's an earring collection that we have curated together with the local artists, and I'm wearing some of them today. And each of these earrings tell a story, a climate story, and there's a call to action behind those earrings as well. And just another way, a different way to share the work that we do, but also to promote and amplify, sorry, I shouldn't say promote, to amplify and elevate stories on the front lines. So these earrings were sold at the Queensland Gallery of Modern Art during the Asia Pacific Triennial. They sold out in like 2 days or 3 days. So we're looking at potentially getting a few more to do an online shop. But it was really awesome for our young people to see themselves as models, first of all, and then be able to resonate with the stories of the earrings that they were wearing. This was another poem that I'm not going to show today because it's quite long, but it's called Mama's Bones, and it talks about how a lot of our families back home are seeing their loved ones' graveyards being inundated by salt water and having to collect Mama's bones. And this poem is normally performed with a sivasarmo, and we've used that in a lot of spaces to also share that story and that reality with communities who are probably very detached from what that spiritual connection is with land and also ancestors. I'm just conscious of time, so I might close with just sharing this article that it might be of interest to those academics out there. It really highlights, I guess, pretty much everything I've shared and how we use this new form of activism using culture and stories to fight for climate justice. So that's written by Dion Anari and Lisa Williamo Jameson. And you'll see some photos in there that you've seen in this slideshow as well. But it will just be a bit more of a cleaner and more concise and probably a bit more articulate in expressing the work that we do than I can. But I thought that might be a good reference for those who are doing some work in that space. And I also just wanted to share this quote that's by a staunch and powerful young Pacific climate warrior named Brianna Fruin, who was of Samoan descent. And she says that true leadership is dedicating your life to weaving a fala or a mat that you know you'll never live to lay on, but being content in knowing that your children will. And so the work that we are doing now and the work that has been done before us is to ensure that there is a future and that our people, especially our young people living away from their homelands, who have maybe never been home, have the opportunity to go back home and to reconnect. So I've put here some of our details here if you want to keep in touch or if you want to follow us. There's lots happening. I wasn't able to cover everything, but thank you in advance for your support and for sharing, I guess, some of what you've heard today with your network and your spaces. And so I think I'll pass it back to Bridget. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Mary. That was great. Yeah, thanks, Mary, for such an insightful presentation. I know that I absolutely loved hearing about your passion for storytelling and climate justice. I think we can all agree that storytelling connects us to, I guess, like those universal truths about ourselves and the world. And it's such an awesome way to fight for climate justice. So it was really lovely to hear about your work with Pacific Climate Warriors and the power of storytelling. So thank you, Mary. We will open up to some questions now. If anyone wanted to pop any questions in the chat, or if you just wanted to unmute yourself and talk out loud, please feel free. This is quite an open space.
I had a quick question, Mary. So I think one thing that I really admire about you, especially as somebody who has done a communications degree, and I felt so disillusioned by the industry. How did you find, like, what was your career path to get where you are and to be able to use your knowledge for so much good?
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, likewise. You know, I really thought when I was in my degree that I would climb the corporate ladder. Really convinced myself that that was what success looked like. And I probably admit I was a little bit money hungry. But my career path was very different. I actually did 10 years in community pharmacy. And at the same time, I was a Pacific liaison officer in high schools on the north side. and just, yeah, supporting our schools with a lot of that cultural responsiveness and cultural awareness that it was lacking. And then I did some tutoring, looking after a lot of our borders up here in Brisbane as well, and just did a lot of volunteering community work and community engagement. Really passionate in the multicultural space as well, advocating for our migrant and refugee background young people. And so it was kind of all that kind of volunteer things that kind of pushed me into the space and equipped me with, I guess, the knowledge and the skill to be able to meaningfully engage with community at the grassroots level. My day job at the moment is as a multicultural community worker in Logan. So definitely not what I thought when I was like, yes, I'm going to do public relations. But it's really been that, yeah, on the ground work in meaningfully engaging and co-designing with communities, consulting with communities, and creating programs with communities that has kind of, yeah, led me here. And I continue to learn from those around me. You know, we have some amazing elders that have been doing this for a long time, but also a lot of young people with new and innovative ideas that none of us have even considered. So for me, being in community and being able to have access to those walking libraries is kind of how my career, or I would like to say more my calling, has been shaped.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. Politics next.
You're funny. It's hilarious. Oh, thanks for the kind comments in the chat, friends. That's nice.
Mary, I did have a question as well, and a bit of a comment, I suppose, coming on from what Amy and you were just talking about. It seems that community engagement, as we know, is so important, and it's interesting when you talk about climate and climate justice and fighting for these improvements that we want to see, that we often hear from scientists, especially, for us working at, some of us working at universities, or for students, we hear from scientists that talk about the stats, which is so important. But it is really refreshing to hear people on the ground affected and fighting for this, and to hear their stories of what it means for you. So I think that is such a good insight that Pacific Climate Warriors has, I think, that we don't always hear about. And then I guess thinking about the community, I was wondering, are there any projects or any events or something in the works for the future that we can see more of, the Pacific Climate Warriors or the Brisbane chapter or any of the other groups of work that we can be involved in or see?
Thank you, Bridget. Yeah, I agree, especially about the science. I am not a scientist, but our people were also the first scientists. So, our science looks different from, I guess, what we see scientists today. But I think the powerful thing about coupling science with stories is that it humanizes it. A number then becomes a story. And so I think for people, and we do have a few of our young people who both have that science background, but also that community engagement, storytelling experience, they're powerhouses, because they can, really, the in-between that I'm talking about, they can merge those in-betweens and communicate in such a powerful way. And so, for us, we know, like, you don't need to be a scientist to advocate for climate change, but there is also a place for that too. So yeah, it's just that humanizing element that I think might be lacking in some of those spaces.
Totally.
And in terms of your question about what's next, COVID really did put a spin into how we do our work. We actually used to often meet in the Pacific, and I know Inez just came back from Fiji, the lucky thing, but it's been a while since we've actually all come together and workshopped, what is next for us. So for us in Brisbane, we've been really proactive in supporting things that are already happening. So especially with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, there's the Our Islands, Our Home campaign for the Torres Strait that we've been, just supporting whenever we need to, and attending events and finding ways of collaboration in the meantime. So there's nothing in particular but we're always open to things like this, for example, to share and to learn. And I think it's when we meet people and we actually do that consultation and that community engagement, then we actually find out, okay, what would actually be meaningful for you, for us? And so unfortunately, there's nothing particularly planned, but if you follow our socials, you'll definitely be the first to know what that is.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Thanks, Mary. I think COVID definitely threw a spanner in the works for everybody. So I can understand it'd be hard to be able to connect with all of the other Pacific climate warriors out there. But I guess it's a bit of a watch this space, maybe, of what there's more to come. And obviously this fight that the story that you're trying to tell it's a big one, and we've got a long way to go. So I think obviously there's going to be more things that you guys are going to be involved in.
Yeah, definitely. And I know there's like some amazing people right here. And if there's anything that you think that there's an opportunity for, I don't know, whether it be collaboration or just support, or, you know, I'm happy to hear from you as well, because yeah, until I met, I think it might have been Linda and Inez, didn't even know there was this community out there that we could be engaging. So yeah. I think it's all about those genuine relationships and continuing to build and maintain and support each other. We should be complementing, not competing.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's a really good point, Mary. Okay, well, it's getting close to 1 o'clock. I guess I'll do a final, any other comments or questions from anybody watching today?